the same time, I have this crippling sense of inferiority, that it really don't matter. No one really sees me. And so I turn to pornography, because that's where, at least for a man, you feel like it's pretend, it's not real, it's fake, but you feel like, oh, this woman sees me. She thinks I'm something. And so I turn to pornography, because that's where I try to give value. So by the time I got to be 35 years old, the worst thing happened to me. It worked. It worked for a while. I did get promoted. I did make money. But I also destroyed a marriage. I also had no clue how the past was impacting me, how 4 years of sexual abuse had damaged me, because it was my normal. It was my normal. I mean, when people hear of a child being sexually abused, they go, oh, of course that's going to affect you. I was 35 years old. I didn't think it affected me, because that's just my normal. So I had constructed a life to answer those questions. If I work hard enough and I get enough money and I get promoted quick enough and I'm useful, somebody's going to tell me I have value. And if I get enough money and I have enough stuff, and I am the funniest, or I'm whatever, someone's going to tell me, oh, I see you. I know who you are. Here's your identity. It doesn't work, but it does for a while. It does for a while. And we all have that story of one way or another. It might not be my story. All of our stories are different. Some are tragic, some are passive, but we all have it. And see, we have to be willing to let God take us back to those early answers and change those. Because even if you had a relatively peaceful, safe childhood, there's one thing about pain. One thing about painful memories is that painful memories can erase a lot of good. Ask a couple that's been married for 25 years, faithful for 25 years, and there's one night of infidelity. One night. Does that one night destroy 25 good years? You better believe it does. See, pain can create these deep chasms in our heart and counteract great good. And so these events that happen to us, these wounding moments, doesn't have to be one moment, one clear day. It can just be an accumulation of things that answer these questions, these core questions. Now, you might be saying, hey, I'm not really wounded. I had a pretty good childhood, blah, blah, blah. But I got to tell you that we don't live in the Garden of Eden. We live in a war zone. In a war zone. And there are no unwounded soldiers in war. No unwounded soldiers. You don't get through this world with a whole heart. It's a broken system with broken people. Even in the Bible, you see all through, you see Joseph, right? Joseph was sold into slavery. He was called a dreamer. That wasn't a compliment, right? He was called a dreamer, and he was sold into slavery. David, when he went to face Goliath as a younger man, he was told, your heart is evil for wanting to do this. By his own family, by the way. He even says even Jesus was misunderstood by his family. See, we're far from Eden. And so if you're tempted to go, I escaped any serious harm, I'm pretty confident in my upbringing and how these questions were answered for me. Well, if you don't think that you're broken enough that you need to hear more deeply from a true Father, then you don't understand the gospel. Because Jesus himself said in Luke 4, it says, so he came to Nazareth where he'd been brought up, As his custom was, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, and he stood up to read, and he was handed the book from the prophet Isaiah. He opened the book, and he found the place where it was written, quote, this is Jesus speaking, quoting Isaiah, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he's anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord." Then he closed the book, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of all who were in the synagogue were fixed on him. And he began to say to them, "Today, this scripture is fulfilled within your hearing." He's saying, my mission is to heal the brokenhearted and set the captives free. That's what I'm here for. If you're not brokenhearted and you're not captive, is he not here for you? If you think you're not, often we misunderstand that word brokenhearted. We think Jesus is saying, I'm here to make sad people happy. No, the term that's used for broken and brokenhearted in this usage is the same term that they would use for like a broken door or a broken gate. It means something is not functioning the way it was designed. It's broken. It's not sad. It's not an emotional element. Now you might have emotion because you're broken. But it's meaning, Jesus is saying, I came to fix things that are no longer functioning the way I intended to. I came to take the thing that was broken and make it whole again. And think about when Jesus said this, when this event happened. This was right on the heels of his temptation in the wilderness. Have you ever read about Jesus' temptation in the wilderness and wondered about what it was all about? Well, what's the question that Satan always asks Jesus? If you are the Son of God. What's he questioning? His identity. Isn't he? If you're the Son of God. He's going right to this core question. If you're the Son of God. And first he kind of hits them one by one. If you're the Son of God, turn these stones to bread. Prove who you are. Prove who you are. Now, let me back the clock up one more step. Jesus had just gotten baptized. And God said, "You're my beloved Son, and I'm so pleased with you." He's given him his value and his identity. And then it says immediately after he's baptized, he goes to the desert. And what's the first thing Satan does? Your identity? You heard from your Father. If you're the Son of God, prove it. Turn these stones to bread. Show me who you are. And if you go back to when I talked about those answers have to come certain ways, the value, your identity, has to come from something external, and it can't have conditions. Satan is saying, I'm going to give you a condition to show me who you are. Prove to me who you are. Turn these stones to bread. He's saying, I'll believe you if you do something. His true Father had already said, you don't have to do anything. I already know who you are. So you see how Satan is taking the very thing and flipping it. If you are. And then he says, well, turning the stones to bread is a value. So first he's saying, if you are the Son of God, he's questioning his identity. Turn these stones to bread, he's questioning his value. Do something to prove you're valuable, that you're really, God really is with you. And then the last one, he says, if you worship me, I'll give you all the earthly kingdoms. So he shows them and says, I'll give them all to you because they've been given to me, so I can give them to you. Satan wasn't lying. You know who gave him all the earthly kingdoms? Adam. Because God had given Adam and Eve dominion over the earth. When they sinned, when they stopped trusting the heart of God, and they trusted the heart of the enemy, they gave him that power. So Satan wasn't pulling one over on Jesus. He truly could have given him, but not the right way. And so he was questioning his destiny. So Satan hit him in his identity, his value, and his destiny individually. And then the last temptation that's recorded is really Satan wrapping all three things together into one. It says it took him to the top of the temple and says, hey, throw yourself off the temple, and God said that he has angels, and he will protect you, and he'll catch you before you hit, and blah, blah, blah. Well, he's hitting all three, because he says, again there, if you're the Son of God, jump. If you're the Son of God, so he's questioning his identity. He says, throw yourself off, and it's written that that he will assign angels to protect you. He's questioning his value. Is God really going to step in here and get you before you hit the dirt, hit the rock at the bottom? And then he says, and angels will bear you up. He's saying, think about this. Really, play this out in your head. So Jesus is at the very top of the temple, which is pretty high up. I'd get hurt if I jumped off this, right? He's saying, hey, fling yourself off. If you're the Son of God, fling yourself off and prove it. Because God said he would send his angels to protect you. So show that you're valuable, because what if God doesn't protect you and you hit, And then he says, angels will bear you up before you hit. What would have happened if Jesus actually would have done that? Now, if you go to the Capitol building in Denver and you throw yourself off and angels show up and catch you and gently set you down on the ground, what's going to happen to you? You're going to be famous. You're going to be famous, big time. So he's tempting Jesus with a destiny. Hey, you want to get famous quick? Hey, you got a message? Cool. I'll make you famous quick. Jump off this temple, and if the angels catch you and gently set you down in front of all the people that are there, you're going to get the fame. You can accomplish your mission so much easier that way, Jesus. So he's tempting him in his destiny. So he wraps them all three together. But right after that, Jesus comes and he's really clear. He's saying, no. Yeah, I know who I am. I know my value. And I know my true mission. And nothing's going to deter me. Then he goes to the temple and he reads Isaiah. And he's telling us, now here's my mission. What I have, the connection I have that answers those core questions for me, I'm here to get that for you so that you can be just as connected to a true Father. So you can be just as clear about who you are, and the value you have, and the mission that God has for you. So this is how the wound cycle works. This is how we get there, how we get to the places that we are. First, painful situations occur. So I call this the wound cycle, right? This is painful situations occur, and they create what I call a wound, right? And see, hidden within that wound is a message, and the message always contains a lie. And the lie is always targeted at those core questions. Then what we do is we believe the lie. We make an agreement with it. That's true. That must be true. We agree with it. And then that forms this version of normal. Our outlook, what we think about ourselves, what we think about others, what we think about God, this normal. Then the enemy uses that normal as a foundation for what I call the fatherless cycle, which we'll talk about in next time. That fatherless cycle creates and deepens those wounds. Rinse and repeat. And away we go, right? Once he gets us caught, especially as kids, it's just a cycle. It's a self-fulfilling, it's a great plan. Wound us when we're little, where we can't mentally understand what's going on around us. We assume it's us. We assume it's because something's wrong with us. We believe it. We agree with it. We start living our life that way. We start distancing ourselves from other people. We start giving them a face, a mask that we want them to see. And then we feel more isolated, which proves that we don't have value, which wounds us deeper, which makes us pretend more, which wounds us more, and so on, and so on, and so on. And again, it doesn't have to be, a violent, aggressive wound. It could be a passive wound. So a father's a workaholic. That's the situation. It's a painful situation. The wound is the boy's alone without a father. The little girl's alone without a father. The message is there must be a reason why Dad doesn't want to be at home with you. What's the lie? Well, it's because you're not important. That's why. We believe it. That's our value. The answer is, I don't have any value. And then we agree with it. I guess I'm not worth much on my own. Again, when this happens when we're little, we don't consciously, right? It's happening so quickly. So your normal is, well, if you're a driven person, well, if I don't have much value or worth of my own, then I'm going to go get it. I'm going to go get my value. Or if you're more of a passive person, you just accept the judgment and fall into line. And I guess I'm not really worth too much. You let people use you. You get into relationships where people use and abuse. That foundation is laid then where you've either been striving to perform to get love, or you have resignated yourself to, God would never love someone like me. I'm worthless. And then you get into the fatherless cycle, which you never really understand how a true father actually loves you, how deeply he loves you. You never really understand that value. You never really understand that you're not just a son or a daughter of God. You are his beloved son, his beloved daughter. If you were the only one on earth, he would have launched his rescue mission for you. We never really understand that, and that fatherless cycle just kicks in and just keeps on going.